I've hiked a lot in Vermont, the Mount Washington area, the White Mountains, probably if you add it all up in the White Mountains, probably. And I just could not imagine how this man is going to run across that. I just could not imagine the amount of energy you still need to do that. If he was only doing that and starting out fresh, I'd be saying, oh, that's crazy. But having been on the trail 35 days and he has that ahead of him, it's like, to me, it was completely unfathomable.
Hello, my running brothers and sisters. This is Running Book Reviews, where you can get a detailed review of a book before deciding whether you want to buy it for yourself. Maybe you just want a little bit of inspiration or a little bit of extra motivation, something to help you in your training. Well, you've come to the right place. My name is Alan, and along with my super co-host Liz, today we're going to review the book North by Scott Jurek.
So for those of you that don't know Scott, he's pretty famous in the ultra race environment. He famously won Western States 7 times. He's one of the greatest ultra runners in sports history, and he's been named Adventurer of the Year by National Geographic and was a key character in the famous book Born to Run. And if you haven't read that book, eventually we will review that one as well.
We'll have to do that eventually, I guess. And quite famous for being a vegan as well, I believe.
Oh, that's true. I left that out, and it was actually a core. Well, it wasn't a core focus of the book, but it was mentioned a few times how people. When he was doing his run, which we'll get into soon, people left him vegan treats along the trail, which is kind of very thoughtful. So the book is North, and it's called North because it's basically Scott's attempt at a fastest known time of the Appalachian Trail, which is a trail that most people hike from what they explained in the book. Most people will hike north to south, but Scott decided to do his fastest known time going from south to north, which is considered harder. So the book overview is basically, it starts with chapter 1 is just sort of how he got this idea. And then the rest of the book is his account of the whole journey of doing this fastest known time. So all the chapters are sort of things that his experience in certain sections of the trail, and the book is divided into 5 parts, which represent like parts of the Appalachian Trail. So the
by
first
geography, basically.
Yeah. So the first part is called the Deep South. That's where he started. And then the second part is Virginia, which is, so Deep South is chapter 2, 3, 4, and 5. Chapter 1 was just his account of how he got the idea, what kind of happened, a little bit of the background story. Virginia is the next big section. It's chapter 6, 7, 8. Then there's Mid-Atlantic, which is chapter 9 and 10. New England is chapter 11, 12, 13. And then Maine is chapter 14, 15, 16, 17. So up until the finish.
Okay, just winding it back to the beginning. It seemed to me right at the beginning when him and I guess Jenny, his wife, she also features and writes quite a bit in the book, so you get her perspective all the way through. But it seems to me that they didn't have sort of a clearly established goal. It was a little bit like Scott was he'd finished his career as one of the most prestigious ultra runners of all time, basically, and he was then in a position where is he kind of done? Is he going to become an ambassador for the sport and do more of those promotional type things, or does he still have fire in his belly? Does he still want a challenge? And I think Jenny seemed to be thinking, it's family time. They were trying to have a baby and those kind of things. And Scott was thinking, no, I need to have one last go. I need to sort of bring some kind of finale to my career, do some final swan song, a major event. And he was looking to just, I think, close his running career on some magnificent achievement. And then he got thinking about the Appalachian Trail and that this would be his final thing. But it didn't look like they'd done really a lot of huge planning beforehand. And in fact, because of circumstances, Jenny had a miscarriage a few months before they were due to go and do the trail. They never did any practice. I think the book actually says they did 3 kilometers of practice on the trail. So they took on the whole Appalachian Trail, not exactly knowing why they were doing it, which led them to question why they were doing it when it started to get tough. And without a professional amount of practice. In fact, Scott actually says all of his super historical wins at various events and his career as an ultra runner is practice enough, which is kind of comes across as a little bit arrogant, I think. But also they were missing time and just decided they would just use their experience, plan it roughly, and get in there and make it happen.
Yeah, it did kind of seem like that. I mean, yeah, it's kind of true that he ran so many races and winner of so many that he's been kind of practicing his whole life. But he also lives on the West Coast, and the Appalachian Trail, compared to the trail that they have on the West Coast, apparently is a lot more difficult, like more technical, more rocks and things like that. So he was not really prepared. And yeah, and they were, even just the support van, they had kind of not slept very much leading up to leaving, because they were trying to get this van ready to be gone for like 46 days. So it was it seemed like it was sort of planned, but at the same time, like maybe very quickly planned. They didn't plan every single aspect of it like some of the other people that attempted the fastest known time, which they actually talk about in the book a little bit later on.
So they started off, this attempt was documented in 2015, started off in summer, May 27th, near 6 a.m., 2015, started their attempt. And for those who don't know the Appalachian Trail, it goes from Georgia. They're going from south to north, so they're starting in Georgia. Goes 2,189 miles through the mountainous areas of the eastern seaboard, all the way to Maine, to Mount Katahdin in Maine. And in order to better the current fastest known time then, they were going to have to do that in 46 days, which made about a 50 mile per day. So they're going to go 46 days, 50 miles or 80 kilometers, averaging every day through mountainous, treacherous sort of trails. And halfway through, they got hit by some hurricanes as well. They got some of the wettest rainfalls on record. So the magnitude of the task, it's difficult to imagine, really. I know I've actually ran a little bit of some of that area. I ran a loop called the Pemi Loop, which is in Vermont. No, it's in New Hampshire, and runs along through Franconia Ridge and some of the other mountains near the Presidential Traverse. And I did the Pemi Loop in one day. I think it took me sort of 12 hours.
I remember that.
But it was only about half of the distance well, it was about 50 kilometers. So it was about 2/3 of the distance that Scott Jurek covers in one day. And I was totally smashed at the end of that day, completely wrecked. I mean, I could not move at the end of the day. my running buddies had to virtually drag me the last few kilometers.
I remember you saying that when you came back.
I was really, really, really smashed. And to think that he did kind of more than that every day for 46 days, it just puts a
It's
big
mind-blowing.
exclamation mark on the size of the challenge. Because once you get into reading the book, you're just going, okay, day 1, day 2, day 3, and you're not really thinking much about his challenge, other than as it starts to build up on him, you realize, well, this is not a gimme by any means. So off they went. They had with them a friend called Louis El Coyote. But El Coyote, Coyote was his trail name. He served as a helping photographer to begin with, and he was with Scott when he was in the Mexican desert with Born to Run. And Scott actually has a trail name as well, El Venado, which is the deer.
Oh wow!
He got another trail name as he was going on the Appalachian Trail, which he got later. He was given that, I think, by Cabello Blanco in Born to Run. So they started off trying to run. Jenny's driving the van in between kind of contact points where roads cross the trail, and off they go. Everything's going great for a few days and everybody's having fun, and then it starts to get tough quite quickly.
Yeah, because he starts to get an injury, so he hurts his knee, which is around day 6, which is very early in the whole thing. And then he actually gets a second injury because he kind of seems to favor one leg, and so he ends up also having a quad injury in the other leg. He gets kind of discouraged very early, and he has to sort of decrease the amount of mileage that he's doing.
So he's limping and walking after 6 or 7 days already, quite severely injured, not able to move, and already getting depressed. And that's where we see the first arrival around about day 5, I think, of one of his friends, David Horton, or colleagues. I don't know if it's a real friend, but somebody he's done things with in the past, and had a lot of previous contact with, and knows him well. The guy they call Horty.
And this guy, I had never heard of this guy, but he set the fastest known time for the Appalachian Trail in 1991. So he was he also set a fastest known time for the Pacific Crest Trail in 2005. And then I think he also ran a trail that goes like east-west. Yeah, because in the book it mentioned that it forms a letter H for Horty. I kind of remember that. But I had never heard of him, but I mean, definitely an accomplished runner. And so he was there, and he sort of really kind of was telling Scott, but this is what you do. Like, you're going to get through this, even though it's super early in the race. And with reason, Scott is a bit discouraged and not thinking that he's going to think this is going to be a failed attempt. But then Horty is just kind of like, no, you just keep going, you keep moving, and
get up in the next mountain, you'll feel better. That sort of. Horty seems to be a bit of a prickly sort of character, not like warm and cuddly, a pretty hard-nosed, been there, done that sort of guy, and not very forgiving. And I think, I guess we mere mortals. I think if I'd been Scott, injured, and then I got this guy who's been there, done that, telling me how it is, I think I would have given up there and then, or punched him probably. But they seem to be able to take the positives from that.
He seems to really respect Horty and his opinion. So I think it seemed like for Scott it was encouraging. He listened to Horty. So I think I wasn't sure as I was reading it that it was such a good idea to keep going, and I thought it was going to end in him, I don't know, tearing a meniscus and having to go home. But in the end, yeah, it didn't end there. So I was wrong about that.
It's just when things are getting to a low ebb very early on that we get the first mention of trail angels, effectively people that Scott meets on the way. I think the whole story in general features, probably the thing it features really is the Appalachian Trail. Scott's just a passenger in the story here trying to get through. The star of the story is the Appalachian Trail. And two key things about the Appalachian Trail is there's a series of team or help that he needs to get. So you see Horty, and then it becomes a cast of wonderful trail superstars who will keep popping in to help him out.
And all that was not planned. It was none of that planned.
No, Jenny makes a call and says, "Oh, things are going badly," or they're improvising their way with their superb contacts. And the other thing that's a feature of the trail is the trail angels, i.e., everyday people who pop up to help him, or are either there by random good luck because they happen to be doing their own thing on the trail, or they know that he's doing the trail. They're following him on his tracker because you need a tracker in order to register your official result. And they come and they bring him food or gifts. On day 8, he meets two ladies hiking the trail in a southward direction. They talk to him, and he's really overcome with the fact that they're very enthusiastic, and they tell him that they believe in him and that he can achieve the goal. And he goes from being crushed with injury and almost giving up to really starting to believe in himself again. And we see this recurring all the way through, that in fact it's not just Scott who has the means to rise in the adversity, but also all of the people feed him these things, and he uses all of that, which makes it a pretty interesting read. I think it's kind of fun to see the human dynamic and how that's working, and how that makes such a difference to your ability to go on or not.
Yeah, and Jenny as well. Like Jenny kind of is tracking, is doing all the crewing, and she's managing the social media sites because there are people that are following Scott, and there's also all the positive that comes out of the the comments that they get through social media, even though there are some not so positive people, like the one that they mentioned is a guy named Warren Doyle, who's
a
known
self-appointed gatekeeper of the trail.
Yeah, so he was quite negative, but Jenny would sort of filter through that. She would she wouldn't let Scott see the negative comments. She would just let him see the positive ones.
Jenny gets creeped out as well a couple of times because she's in the van on her own a lot of the time, waiting for Scott, and you get some dialogue some chat from Jenny of how she's going with her support for Scott. So she's on alone in secluded spots in the van, in areas which have stories about criminal activity and people behaving badly. She gets creeped out a few times, including once by this guy, Warren Doyle, who's wandering down the trail, making sure that people are behaving correctly according to him. And I think he's a bit of a trail purist. He thinks, it should only be for walkers, and that they should only use certain equipment and those kind of things. But there are also some other times which are much more disconcerting, I think, where Jenny fears for her safety a little bit, and kind of worried me a bit that, there might be areas of the trail. They seem to be down towards the south, a bit less occupied and perhaps a bit more unsafe.
Yeah, and she, in the book, that Jenny kind of has a few incidents where she's, either followed by another car or followed when she's going somewhere. It's always seems to be when she's alone, although she was alone a lot of the time in the beginning. Sort of towards the end, because she calls people for help for Scott, she ends up, I think, being a little more surrounded.
Yeah.
But they actually had to rethink their strategy, and at one point Scott said, well, don't meet me at every intersection, meet me only at the intersections with like paved roads, instead of being at every sort of intersection where there's those little gravel roads that have nobody around. So they changed their strategy along the way because of that, because at one point Jenny was really not feeling very safe. Along the same lines, throughout the book, there are places where they mention these stories from the Appalachian Trail, how people have gone missing and have not been found like decades later, or sometimes they will find remains of people that went missing like decades ago. And it sounds a little scary. I mean, it makes you kind of wonder.
Doesn't sound like the sort of thing you would like, Liz. I remember being with you on the Peak to Brew when we were running through the night, and you had to run a leg through the night. You didn't seem altogether comfortable with that.
No, and I was running on the side of like a road. I mean, a pretty busy. Not, it wasn't a highway. It was, but it's a big road, clearly marked. And yeah, I felt I was kind of scared and a little freaked out having to run at night. And I can't even imagine knowing stories like that while I'm running. It's one thing if I didn't know. What I don't know can't hurt me, but if I know, and to go on the trail after knowing those things, and it sounded like they knew.
Yeah, and Scott describes it as a sort of green tunnel, the Appalachian Trail, but at nighttime it'll be a black tunnel. So off you go on your own, Liz, into the black tunnel. I don't think that would be for you.
No, I don't think so. Yeah, it's amazing what he did. You read it and you're just like, wow, on so many levels. It's amazing, the amount of mileage he does every day, the amount of time he spends. But at the same time, it's sort of like, okay, not for me though.
So he's walking with a torn quad from day 6. He's got 40 days to go. By day 12, he's back onto 50-mile days, and his legs are sort of improving while he's doing 50 miles every day.
Very impressive.
There's an interesting bit about him thinking about trying to toughen himself up and reflecting on his mother. He reflects upon a little bit about the guilt that he felt because his mom was sick and he was looking after his mom every day, and he left her for one day and she fell over and broke her hip, and she didn't recover well, and she ended up not walking again, and deteriorated after that. And he blames himself a little bit and had a lot of guilt, and you could see him sort of trying to purge the guilt by running the days, hard days on the trail, but also talking about how tough his mum was and what her attitude. She never complained. She was very sick. She couldn't move around, but she was just sort of toughing it out. She's just so tough, and she gave him an example of how to be tough. And he talks a little bit through that, and that's part of him finding his way. He's gone into this major undertaking without seeking the deep reasons why he's doing it, more or less going in with superficial reasons. And now as the trail's getting to him and the fatigue's building up and you go searching inside yourself, he's starting to bring all of these things out, which also makes for a good story. It's not just, I'm walking down the trail, and although he does meet a few interesting things going down the trails. Bear cubs, I think, being one.
Yep. Yeah. He meets a mama bear with her cubs, and that was pretty scary. Actually, that was one of my fears when we did the Trans-Selkirks, was that we would meet a bear because it was bear country. And yeah, he
Yeah, but there's
actually
no
meets a
chance of
bear.
us meeting a bear because we were singing Roxanne by the Police at the top of our voices.
Yeah, yeah. So I think we were still kind of lucky, but it's okay. It's okay. Let's say it was because we were singing Roxanne.
It even my version of Roxanne even repelled the other runners. So there was no chance of a bear being around.
So the next sort of character that comes to spend some time with Scott is one that I've heard of. His name was Carl Metzler. His nickname is the Speed Goat, and I'd heard of him before because Speed Goat are the Hoka shoes that are for trail, and I knew that this shoe was named after Carl
Carl
Metzler.
Metzler's
Yeah.
nickname.
Yeah. So Carl Metzler actually spends a good chunk of time with Scott. He's there from day 16 to 32, and he actually comes back later on as well. But he's there from day 16 to 32, and he seems to be a bit of a character. And Jenny, when she sort of writes a little bit about her own experience, she writes how she wasn't initially thrilled that he was going to be there, but he ended up giving her a lot of tips on how to be a good crew, because she was basically a one-woman crew, and they hadn't really planned to that level of detail, and he really gave her a lot of specifics, like make sure that whenever you meet Scott, you offer him several types of food, like not just packaged trail food like bars, but also like something salty and something warm, and those kinds of things. And he has a spreadsheet because he also attempted the fastest known time, but he didn't make it till the end. So he ended up like having a spreadsheet of where they should be on what day in order to achieve the goal, and he went ahead and even booked a camping spot. So he really helped Jenny out a lot, and she was seemed very grateful to have him in the end, even though at the beginning he was
He'd done a lot of pre-planning, and he's rigorously organized.
Mm-hmm.
And as you say, he didn't seem like Jenny's sort of person. And then I noticed in the book him telling Jenny, "Don't do that, do this," as you explained. And I thought, "Oh, there's going to be fireworks," but in fact,
there wasn't.
No. And I guess that comes from the fact that Jenny's first loyalty is to Scott, and she could see that Speed Goat's first loyalty was to Scott. He wanted Scott to win. In the true trail tradition of helping each other and wanting each other to do well. And I think she valued that above anything else. And so, they hit it. It looked like it was going to be fireworks, but they actually hit it off really, really well and became really good friends on the trail. And in fact, with Speed Goat's organization and guidance, Scott started to claw back some of the mileage that he'd lost. I think Speed Goat referred to it as nickel and diming.
He did.
He's got to claw back a little bit every day, nickel and diming our way to the fastest known time. So that was pretty cool. Speed Goat was very devoted to being organized so that Scott would have the maximum amount of time. One of the things that Scott was very keen to do was to be accommodating to trail visitors. So people who came to see him on the trail, to say hi, to run, he made a point of being accepting towards those people. And I think Speed Goat's view was no, get them away, keep them away. Don't let them interfere with. Don't let them hold up Scott. And he was telling Jenny, keep the trail visitors away.
Yeah. And even just like help when he comes in. So take his pack for him and fill it up for him. meet him on the trail instead of having Scott run the extra few meters to the
Yeah, go
van
run to
because
the
he
van,
was.
go out and get him. Yeah.
Yeah. So he gave a lot of good tips, but at the same time, throughout the book, it sounded like Scott was very much a people person. Like he would, if people came specifically to see them, he would really want to make them happy and spend a little time with them and stuff like that. Both Jenny and Speed Goat were sort of like, no, you need your energy to run. You have to focus on the run. So that there was a little of that, but it didn't sound like there was any friction because of it. It was just that.
Just a different style, a different tactic.
Yeah, it was just he had to do his chatting while he was moving instead of taking selfies at the van.
Yeah, what seemed really interesting for me was Scott's sort of a vegan and a typical West Coast sort of more casual seemingly guy, but very healthy living, but a bit disorganized or casually organized. Whereas and he's fast friends with this guy Speed Goat, who is the little bit of research they did on him. He eats everything, so he eats fast food and drinks Red Bulls. He was sponsored by Red Bull, and
it's a good thing he's sponsored because he drinks a lot of those.
Yeah. so he seems to have like the reverse lifestyle to Scott, and but he's highly organized, super disciplined, and very rigorous, which Scott doesn't have. So in both aspects of their lives, they seem to be different, very different. I guess the trail brings everybody together. The fact that they do these adventures.
Yeah, and they had this common goal because it was the fastest known time was something Speed Goat wanted, and Scott wanted as well. And you would think that was, that would be competing against each other because obviously Speed Goat didn't get the fastest known time when he had done his attempts, and now it's nice that he was still, despite the fact that he wants the fastest known time, he was helping Scott to try and get the fastest known time.
Yeah, and it's not in the book, but I think it may be in the afterword of the book, but Scott ends up going afterwards, the year after, Scott ends up doing the reverse, helping Speed Goat when Speed Goat tries to set the fastest known time. But that's another story. I don't think Speed Goat's written the book about that, so we can't,
not yet
talk about that too much. Okay, so we get through the halfway. Jenny, all the way through the book, we never mentioned it, but all the way through the book, we hear reference to Jurek, who is Scott. It's Jenny's sort of name for him, and we hear reference to Jelu, which is Scott's name for Jenny. So we see Scott and Jelu actually going through the halfway, running together alone. 1,095 miles on day 23. So in theory, they're still in target, but they have in front of them some of the toughest sections that are the hardest to run, and you need more hours to run them, and much more difficult to do the average time. So they are still they're halfway distance at halfway time, but they're really behind schedule.
And then to top everything off on day 25, Tropical Storm Bill rolls in, and they get rained on.
And some of the worst weather on record, and they have to run through it.
Yep, and through all the mud.
And Scott starts to get a bit depressed, I think, as well. I think the fatigue is getting to him. Jenny starts to get worried about him, I think, because he's getting very closed down and I guess affected by the fatigue and the challenge. And she arranged some friends to come, a guy called Don, to come up from Seattle to spend some time helping her to crew, but also just being a new face to brighten up Scott's day. And it kind of works a bit, but also Don is pretty hopeless. he might be listening. We shouldn't call him hopeless. He's not very adept
But
at organizing the van and helping the crew and stuff. So it
I
becomes
think
a
he
bit of a
probably read the
problem.
book, so he probably knows.
You think he's hopeless? Yeah.
Well, he's not hopeless, but it's just he's helpful for Scott. But for Jenny, it seems like it's more work for her to have him there.
Once they're getting up more into the north, they're going through most states. So on some days they go through a state every day, and Jenny and Scott have a pact that they'll always run together across the state borders. So that's quite cool.
Mm-hmm.
There's obviously, on a thing like this, you could imagine that there's quite a bit of tension and quite a bit of stress. Jenny's waiting for Scott to come. It's dark and he's not there, and what's happened, and should she go out and get some stuff and run down the trail looking for him, or is there a chance she'll miss him if she does that? Should she wait? So things can get a bit tense, I think, and you see that a little bit in the dialogue. And as they get further north, Jenny starts to call on friends who know the terrain, who are going to help him, because he's starting to fade. He needs support, and the teamwork itself needs support as well. And you see that helping a bit. One terrible thing that happens, a little bit shocking. They're in the rain, and Scott actually sleeps on the trail or just off the trail in some leaves, and then he gets back to the van. Sleeps for a tiny short period, but he gets back to the van, and then when Jenny's looking at him, she finds a tick on him, and then she examines him. She finds 2 more, so she finds 3 ticks on him, and they're freaking out.
And then that's when Scott tells her that he took a nap in the leaves on the side of the trail, which was something that actually they mentioned in the book that you're not supposed to do, because there's all kinds of things that are just off the trail. This is also one of the reasons why I can't imagine doing something like this, because at one point they're talking about, well, you're never supposed to venture off the trail because you can step on a poisonous snake of some sort. I don't remember what it's called, but if you step off the trail, there could be just off the trail, it could be a poisonous snake, or you can there can be bears, there can be spiders and ticks, and you can have Lyme disease. And so Scott was super careless, and he was tired, and he took a nap on the side of the trail. And when Jenny found those ticks, she not
went crazy,
very happy.
Yeah, she went absolutely ballistic, let's say. I think you're a little bit Jenny, sort of like,
I think I'm
worried about everything. I think personally I'm a bit more Scott.
Okay.
I remember walking on some trails in Australia with my kids and casually picking leeches off their legs.
Oh.
So it's not to scare them. Just, I think you got something on your leg. It's what was it, Daddy? Nothing. Just keep going and check you out when we get home.
So instead of being teaching them, you have to stay on the trail because they're.
I don't want to freak them out.
Oh my goodness! What would you say to your wife if you had
she was
to?
There. She was there.
Oh, on the walk.
Yeah, I was checking her for leeches as well.
Oh no! Okay.
So, that creates some tension, and it helps the story. Getting up towards New Hampshire, I think we actually hear the fact that Scott's starting to be, dirty and smelly, but he's actually smelling of vinegar, and this vinegar smell that he has is probably because all of his biochemistry is breaking down in his body. It's probably protein breakdown, and it's byproducts from a fairly catastrophic sort of body effort to keep going. And he's becoming sort of a bit of a shell of his former self. I think some sort of war prisoner, Jenny describes him as visually. You can
Yeah, there were a
imagine.
few times she really mentions that she saw him, and she wouldn't let him know, but she kind of was shocked to see what he looked like.
And at this point in the tough part of the run was really getting into the difficult part. We have a friend, Nestor, who actually went out to meet Scott and run with him. And we're going to try and get Nestor on the line and get him to talk to us a little bit about his experience and how he found Scott and what it was like in a real person on the spot impression. So if we can get that from Nestor, we'll ask him how Scott really was and what the circumstances were around day 34, 35, when they went through Hanover and crossed, I think, from Vermont into New Hampshire.
And that's also when Jenny said that she saw Scott cry for the second time she's ever seen him cry. And the first time was actually when she lost the pregnancy. Their baby didn't have a heartbeat at 8 weeks of pregnancy. That was the first time she saw Scott cry. And the second time was during this trail, fastest known time attempt on day 35. So he's really, not in a very good
Very
place
lowest
physically, and mentally as well. It's towards the end, but at this point, if you say he's on day 35 and it takes 46 if you want the fastest known time, I mean, there's still 11 days left.
Times 80 kilometers. There's still 800 kilometers to run. 900 kilometers.
Including that Franconia Ridge that you guys ran. He hasn't passed that yet.
Yeah, that's right. He went through that about day 37. And we ran that, and I guess I've already described how impossible I would view the task that he undertook. I mean, I was as fit as I could possibly be, and I couldn't get through 2/3 of a Scott Jurek day. And he's absolutely smashed from 38 days on the trail, and he's going to run over these mountains and eventually into the Presidential Trail and onto Mount Washington. Mount Washington being the highest for people who are not familiar. Mount Washington's the highest mountain on the eastern side of the USA, where it's pretty inhospitable. So it's not just, you're not just running along the street. Mount Washington's quite famous because when you get up there, you see a sign and it says the highest winds ever recorded on Earth were measured here. I think something in the 230 miles per hour. And people have been lost, have been just blown off the mountain, and in fact, whole buildings. They used to have I've done the run to the top of Mount Washington race, and they used to have a hut up there, which one day it blew off.
Oh wow!
It's like a lodge. It blew off the top of the mountain, and they never found it. They never ever found it. It just blew off the mountain. And they went looking for it, but they couldn't find it. And then it snows, and then you go, oh, forget it. And the lodge that they have up there now has these giant steel chains across anchored into the ground. They go across the roof, and they're anchored into the ground on the other side.
Oh my goodness!
Basically, just stop it from blowing away.
They're like, we're not losing this one.
So Scott has to run through this area, and I think day 39, after sleeping on the trail for a while, he checks into a hostel and has a shower, and he describes how he comes back to life a bit, gets one more surge of energy. But
really, at this point, in the book, it's describing him as he's very zombie-like, and Scott at one point describes his mental state as like placing his brain on airplane mode. Like he decided to place his brain on airplane mode because he just couldn't think. And it was sort of like after the point where he had been sort of, it sounded like he was like a bit hallucinating because he would, yeah, he was just not in a good place, didn't seem to, really follow what was going on. He had some friends running with him at this point, which was a good thing because they would kind
Yeah.
of, he had two friends at one point running together, and they would chat and he would just kind of listen and follow. And that was sort of all he could do.
And despite, his friends helping him, they're doing about 30-mile average per day over that terrain. They need to do 50 miles per day. So it's looking pretty bad. And I think it's around day 42 that Scott does the calculations for how many miles per day he still has to do in order to break the record, and decides it's impossible. And he just says to Jenny that, it's impossible now. I've lost too much time. There's too much distance per day. I need to stop. We should give up. And I think that's why you see the Jenny aspect come into its own, because you think any wife would just go, oh, my husband's just suffering so much. He's on complete zombie mode. He's not even a human being almost. And he's suffering so much and he wants to stop. And now, okay, he's given me permission to pull him out, so I can pull him out. She doesn't do that at all.
Nope. She's basically tells him that they didn't come this far for him to give up. So he has to keep on trying. And
she also points out to him that his idiot brain on airplane mode has calculated the days wrong, because he forgot to include the last day, which you also get to run in.
Yeah, because there's 11 hours.
And that it's still theoretically possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you see the dialogue from her. She recognizes that she takes this moment back to a time when she saw Scott fail in one of his runs, and he just ran in at the end in one of the major runs, and he bonked or something. He came in all smiling and trying to put a brave face on it, and holding hands with the children and being friendly and stiff upper lip. And she knew, looking at him, that's not Scott. Like, he's dying inside. He's a winner. He wants to succeed. And she really knows him so well and understands that on day 42, she could say, okay, stop, and the pain ends. But in fact, if she says on day 42, stop, the pain ends today, but the pain continues for the rest of Scott's life.
Mm-hmm.
I think she realizes that.
Yeah.
She's there to give tough love. It's her time. And that's when she sort of persuades him to keep going.
Which it was really tough for her too,
Yeah.
because at the same time she was doing this, but she was questioning whether it was the right thing for her to do, because she actually felt kind of guilty about pushing him on, because he was so run down and
so broken. Yeah. And she sends him overnight through the mountains.
Mm-hmm.
after this decision, which is I just get shivers thinking about it. It's absolutely crazy. So Scott continues, and he has his buddies with him now. He has, in particular, a character called Topher, who comes with his wife, and they're good friends. And I think rather than just be super trail superstars, these people are actually good friends of Scott, and as well as being super trail superstars.
Yeah, they're still superstars.
They're great friends of Scott and Jenny, which I think helps a lot, because they need emotional support as well as technical know-how and trail know-how, which they get from other people who are with them. So they start to then do the calculations. How many days left? How many miles per day? What's your current speed? How many hours are you going to have to run for? Are you prepared to do it? The number is less than 24 per day, therefore it's possible. Are you prepared to do it? Can you do it? And they start then getting together with some friends and just trying to work their way through some of the toughest sections.
Mm-hmm.
The 100-mile wilderness in Maine, up to the mountain at Katahdin and the end of the trail,
where there's a story that someone got lost in that section because there are no roads that go in there. So it's sort of like 100-mile section of the trail where there's no way out except to just keep on hiking the trail. And there's a story that someone got lost for 26 days and died 2 miles away from the trail, just because I think they went off the trail to look for something or sleep or something, and they got lost and ended up dying. So this is the kind of section that is.
Yeah, so it's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Tells you how savage it is. And another one of the characters that Scott is with at this point as well is the guy from 127 Hours, Aaron Ralston. He's the guy who had to cut his own arm off because he got caught in the Slot Canyon with his arm wedged in a rock. And I think there's a film called 127 Hours.
He wrote a book.
Scott actually knows him.
Hours.
Yeah, there's a film. Scott actually knows him. It's like a who's who of famous historical trail runners and adventurers.
Yeah, the whole book is just meeting one after the other.
On they go. So Scott's going in with completely broken down, but then he's getting something like an average of 2 hours sleep per night because he's got to run basically through the night in order to keep up the mileage that he needs to achieve the record. The last 3 nights before the final night, he says that he totals up the amount of sleep then that he's had 7 hours in those 3 nights. So he's had less than 2 hours per night, and he's going into the final night. They think they can make it, but Topher does the calculation, and I think he'd promised Scott 4 hours sleep.
Mm-hmm.
He does the calculation on how hard it's going to be to get up the mountain in the condition that they're in, and tells Scott that he can only have 1 hour sleep. And Scott's very, very upset with this because I was promised 4 hours. You think I can't cover the distance? He really wants his sleep, but it turns out that it was a good decision because he needs those extra hours. I mean, he ends up beating the record by eventually getting up the mountain and beating the record by 3 hours and 13 minutes.
Yeah.
So if he'd taken the extra 3 hours sleep, he would have had 13 minutes. That would have been too close for comfort, I think.
Definitely, because in the last section, when it's time to go up that last mountain to the top, he actually he kind of comes back to life in that section. It seems like, but it didn't. It may not have been that way. And if he had to walk up that section, it would have taken him that extra 3 hours. So those 13 minutes would not have.
Imagine being the guy who has to tell Scott Jurek that no, you're wrong. You have to get up. I'm sorry. I know this is crushing you, but no arguments. You have to get up. That takes somebody pretty special in terms of a relationship to do that. And that was I found that quite impressive. So at 2:05 on the 12th of July 2015, Scott reaches the summit and makes it to the top with a bunch of good friends that have been helping him over the last little bit.
And it's also Jenny's birthday on that day.
Yes, and he says happy birthday to Jenny. He remembers to say happy birthday to her, which is fantastic as well. In the moment of his absolute success, he goes over to Jenny and says happy birthday.
Yep. And he had actually thought that he was going to, before they started the whole adventure, he was telling Jenny, oh, we're going to be done way before your birthday, because he thought he was going to take 4 days off of the fastest known time. And
42 days was his target. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Says, I'll be home by then.
Yep. And finally, she ended up having her birthday at the top of the mountain, and Scott finished his fastest known time for her birthday.
So a phenomenal success, but quite a harrowing kind of book, really. They reflect on that a little bit, and I guess they come back to the at the end of the day, why do you do it? They come back to what Horty told them at the beginning. This is who I am. This is what I do. And why would you do something like that? It depends on who you are, and everyone has different reasons. A really nice piece in the afterword I found was 1 year later they have a daughter, Ravenna Lynn, who they call Raven, and in fact now just looking up Scott's bio, they have 2 daughters. I think their other girl is called Evergreen, which, given that there was a backdrop of them trying to have children and Jenny going through her second miscarriage. It's kind of nice to hear afterwards that that part of the story had a happy ending as well.
Mm-hmm.
The whole thing finishes with Scott helping Speedgoat a year later do his own attempt, and in fact Speedgoat ended up breaking Scott's record but going south, which is the sensible way to go according to Speedgoat. I mean, he's the planner.
Apparently. Mm-hmm.
Scott's justification was something like, oh, follow the spring like they did in the history books.
Which just goes to show how, there was, well, I guess there was some strategy, but, I don't want to say that he just decided one day to get in a van and start running up this trail, but it was definitely just at the beginning. They were saying how it's how the way to go, that the way that everybody hikes the trail is from north to south, but he was going from south to north. So, and even the fastest known times before were all done north to south, and he was going south to north. So it was kind of funny that that he just decided to do that, and maybe that's why. Maybe had he done north to south, then the book would have had to be called South, but
Yes, it would.
but maybe he would have been 4 days. Maybe he would have taken those 4 days off, like he had expected to run it in 42 days. Maybe he would have done it if he did it the other way.
I think it makes the story a little bit, doesn't it? The fact that he did it that way. So we have a friend, a good running friend of ours, Nestor, who actually he invited me at the time I remember way back in 2015, to go and join with him, to go and meet with Scott Jurek while he was running a section of the Appalachian Trail. And the weather was miserable. The storms were coming in, so I didn't have time, so I had to decline. But I then found out that Nestor actually been and gone and done this. So what better opportunity than to get a story from the horse's mouth, so to speak, about what it was really like to be on the Appalachian Trail during Scott Jurek's attempt on the record with Scott Jurek. So maybe, Liz, you could introduce our friend.
Nestor is one of our running buddies, so he's in our training group, but he's not always there because he also has a cottage, and he's often over there, so he doesn't come to trainings. But he is a sub 3 hour marathoner, which is my future goal. So one of my heroes, yay, Nestor. And so now we can get to the stuff that everybody wants to hear about, which is his encounter with Scott Jurek.
Sure, Liz. Hi, by the way. Hi, Alan. Yeah, so we had been talking about Alan and I, it's just one of these things that came up when we were running amongst the people running that, did you hear Scott Jurek is doing the Appalachian Trail, yada, yada. So, kind of talked about maybe taking the opportunity if it arose of going down, as Alan mentioned. But nothing really formal came out of it. But then I found myself at Hovey Manor for a couple of nights on a business retreat. And I think we were done, and I think it was a Wednesday morning. Alan would probably know the exact date. And that evening before, the beautiful thing was Scott was using a satellite tracker, which was kind of a little bit new. And on his Facebook page, he had it live. So you could actually tell every 5-minute intervals where Scott was on the trail. It was brilliant. And he had thousands of runners just following him every day, seeing how he was doing. So you had it live, right, for the whole 46 days.
That's amazing.
So the night before, I was looking at it and I went, oh, look at that. He's going to be crossing the 91 directly south of where Hovey Manor is, a couple hours drive, 2.5 hours drive. So I said, you know what? Let's do it. So I got up at like 4 a.m. the next morning, set up the laptop on the driver's seat. Don't tell anyone of this. On the passenger seat.
That's okay. Your secret's safe just between me and Liz. No
So I
created back then it wasn't illegal yet, because cell phones were,
hope.
Starting. Okay, yeah. Let's say that.
But I created a hotspot on my phone, connected, and all the way down, I'm tracking him, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, where's the best place to get off? The plan I had was, okay, to make this foolproof, because I had a margin of error, obviously. is end up somewhere east of Scott and run towards him to the west, and then turn around, run with him to the east.
So this was near Hanover.
This was Hanover on the New Hampshire side. I forget the little town on the Vermont side. There's a river that separates the two states.
So you were actually with Scott in the book. You were with Scott on day 34.
Okay,
I believe.
Interesting. Okay. So as I get closer to her, I know I have to, meet up with the Appalachian Trail, and I can see where the trail is on the map. It starts to rain lightly, then it starts to rain medium. By the time I park the car, it's pouring. But I go, well, I got to do this. So park the car right by the side of the road on the shoulder and hit the trail. And it's well marked.
Tropical Storm Bill is on its way. It hits hard in about 2 more days.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
Yeah. He's very miserable.
So I ran, I forget, half hour, 45 minutes until I run into, well, not literally, but Scott and his wife Jenny was with him that day. And there was someone else running with him, just some Vermonter. So I turn around and, hit the back of the pack, start running. And I wanted to, I'm all excited. I'm running with Scott Jurek. So I wanted to chat. And Jenny kind of looked at me. So she said, not a good day. So, stay quiet. Scott wasn't very interactive. Ran through the forest for about 45 minutes, hit the road where my car was.
What sort of speed was he doing?
Slow.
Oh, okay.
Slow. We were,
he was crushed. He was crushed by this time. I mean, he was.
Yeah.
In our story, it says he was smelling of vinegar because of his protein breakdowns.
He looked, I had only seen him in pictures. He looked tired and miserable. Like, if I looked like he looked in any race, it meant that I did not finish. Like, looking at him, I go, how can he keep going for another 10 days or 11 days, still do the presidentials?
Yeah, and
right?
Accelerate,
and then do the 100-mile wilderness in Maine, and then climb Katahdin. I said, how can he do this? He was stopping a lot for water. He had a little hydro pack with a ceramic filter in his tube. So he was just picking water up from streams. Almost didn't have to because there was water everywhere. It was pouring. So he was hydrating a lot. And then we hit the roads on the Vermont side. As we ran into Hanover over the bridge on the other side, there was like 30, 40 young people waiting for him, cheering, screaming, a lot of young female runners. I don't know if he has a kind of a strong female following or not. And he noticeably lightened up when that happened.
It's not really a poster boy, but it's gotta help your spirits.
It's gotta help your spirits. And he like, you could tell that his shoulders kind of, relaxed a little bit. He just seemed better. In Hanover, they had his support van parked. He went in. We kind of all waited on the sidewalk, the 20, 30 of us. He had the door open so you could see he was hydrating. He was drinking some stuff. Didn't really eat much of anything that I noticed. I didn't even notice him changing his shoes. And I was thinking, my God, his feet must be raw by this point, being wet. Don't forget, if you recall, June was the wettest month in Vermont in history, right? Wow. So he's just spent a month running through slop, absolute slop. But after about 10 minutes, he kind of said, okay, got up, put his drink aside, got outside the van, looked at all of us and said, okay, quickly, line them up. And he did selfies with each of us. I sent you my selfie, Alan.
Yeah, I had a look at it. He didn't look too bad in the photograph.
Not at all. Like, he lightened up for every selfie. What a professional. Like, he smiled. And I'm 5'8". He's like 6'4" or something. So he actually leans down so he doesn't look like he's 8 inches taller than I am. But I thought that was really magnanimous of him. I mean, if I was in his shape, I'd be trying to whimper somewhere in the corner.
How the hell do you... It's amazing that you can do that in sport. I mean, he's doing the fastest known time on a 2,000-mile trek, and he stops to do selfies with you.
And he stopped to do selfies.
It's like, I mean, I guess you wouldn't stop Usain Bolt in the middle of his 100 meters Olympic run, but it's kind of tantamount to that kind of thing, isn't it?
It is. Well, when we were still running through on the trail, and it was quiet because he wasn't interacting, I was looking at his form, from the rear, and I was trying to sort of get a hint of, okay, what makes him so good? And there was nothing really that stood out. Like, his muscles aren't particularly defined. You have some people that have really well-defined calves and these things. Scott doesn't. The only thing that strikes you is that he's tall. He's a tall guy. He has long legs. His tibia is very long, knee to ankle. Very nice, easy, fluid gait, obviously, for someone who's done that kind of ultra running. But there was nothing that, stood out that you could say, oh my God, look, he's obviously in great form. After we did the selfie, again, he didn't diddle down, he didn't wait very long, didn't waste much time. And a whole group of us, probably about 15, start running through the streets of Hanover, picked up the trail, almost lost our way to get to the trail in town, and started running. And I ran with him maybe for another hour. When the climbing started towards some of the higher terrain, and I was weighing back. I hadn't been talking much to him at all, but I just kind of shouted out, "Hey Scott, I gotta go. Good luck. I'm rooting for you." And what amazed me, again, the professionalism is, without breaking a stride or a breath, he goes, "Thanks, Nestor."
Oh, really?
Wow.
My name, which it's not that, it doesn't mean anything other than I was impressed the fact that he would actually remember. I wouldn't remember my name. If I was him, who am I?
You're brain dead by that time.
You're brain dead by that time.
That's amazing.
Then, yeah. And as I ran back, the hour or so back to the car, I just kept thinking, I said, I've hiked a lot in Vermont, the Mount Washington area, the White Mountains, probably if you add it all up in the White Mountains, probably. And I just could not imagine how this man is going to run across that. I just could not imagine the amount of energy you still need to do that. If he was only doing that and starting out fresh, I'd be saying, "Oh, that's crazy." But having been on the trail 35 days and he has that ahead of him, it's like, to me, it was completely unfathomable. So, a superlative long distance runner, obviously, top tier, and a gentleman.
I think he has something in his mentality that not everybody else has, as well as whatever skills and genetics he has.
Right. And it was not lost on me in a moment of sort of humor on my part. I was thinking to myself, because I chatted with his wife for a little while when he was quiet, still on the trail. And her name's Jenny. And that kind of I thought that was a little bit ironic, given, Forrest Gump's girlfriend was Jenny.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? I said, okay, this is kind of interesting little irony.
What was her humor like? Did she seem concerned, or was she just in neutral, just doing whatever she had to do?
She seemed very lighthearted. She kind of seemed, let him do his thing, don't bother him. She chatted with me freely for quite a while. She seemed really nice, very personable. She didn't seem stressed or overly concerned. I don't know how much of that whole experience she ran. There were days that she picked where she did run.
She ran every border crossing with him.
Oh, I see. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah, in the book, she basically would run every day, I think, with him. From what I understood, like they would have a moment where they would run together during the day, but it depended on if she had somebody else to drive the van, because then there was that. Because there were some parts where they were kind of on their own, just the two of them. So
I guess it was hard to get, volunteers for 46 days to take time out of their lives. That's not easy. So they must have had different people for different periods.
So it actually seems like the second half, there were tons of people around, but the first half was a little bit more lonely. Well, just the two of them, or the two of them with one other person. But yeah.
And you started to get some famous people coming out towards the end as well.
Yeah, we mentioned Aaron Rostam from 127 Hours fame. We touched on that, and some of the who's who of ultra trail running were helping him out as well. And I think one of the things he said was that he got help from every single person on the trail who supported him and gave him words of encouragement. And he only broke the record by 3 hours and 13 minutes at the time. So it could have been, Nestor, that your little piece of encouragement that you gave him on your little section of trail for 2 hours made the psychological difference that got him the extra 3 hours and 13 minutes that he needed.
God bless you, Alan.
So I would guess that if we called him up, he would probably put your name next to his on the Maybe that's taking it a little far.
It's a
Maybe
little
that's taking
far.
it a little far.
A little
But
far.
wow, thanks. What an experience. And
Yeah.
thanks for taking time out to tell us about that.
My pleasure.
What
It
a
was
claim to fame. What a claim.
It was
to
a
fame.
hoot. It was, and having that picture as a memento really kind of was icing on the cake.
Absolutely fantastic. Thanks. Okay, so maybe we could get some thoughts on the book overall in general. What did you think of the book, Liz? Any comments?
I mean, coming from a completely, road running track background, I didn't know any of these characters. I had heard of Speed Goat because he has shoes named after him. But it was kind of interesting because I got to sort of read about all these characters and how they're all so different from each other. They're all kind of like fringe characters. They're sort of very, very out there.
They make good story characters because they're all a bit weird.
Yeah, except not in the same way. They're all weird in their own specific way.
Yeah.
It a bit reminds me of, when I went to go work up north with the Inuit. That's how people talk about the white people that go work up north, is that they say that it's all this sort of
fringe dwellers who go
the fringe.
You're banished. It's a bit like Game of Thrones. You're banished to the wall. Go up north.
At the same time, you go up north and, you're automatically friends because
Yes.
you all kind of live up there out of your element. And it seems like trail running in this book, it seems like it's a little bit like that too. Like all these people.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah, and all these people that end up doing these crazy things like running for 46 days, they're all so different, but yet they have this connection because they have this thing in common that they do, even if the reason that they do it is not the same for all of them. And so it was kind of interesting. I liked, I liked reading about it. All the characters were fun to get to know because I'd heard some of these names before, but never really looked them up or anything because they don't run marathons and they don't run tracks. So it was kind of interesting for me in that way. This type of event is, if you hadn't guessed already, not really the type of thing that I would want to do myself. And the book reinforced that. I definitely do not want to run the Appalachian Trail. I'm actually terrified now because now they told me all those stories.
Yeah, well, I hope it doesn't put you off trail running, though. I think what that tells me is that, in terms of developing an interest in doing super ultra adventure type running, I'm not sure that I really want to do that. I would want to, go and sleep in a hotel in between each day and get rested, and then going on a one-day adventure and maybe multiple days, one at a time, like we did in Trans-Rockies, or I did in Trans-Rockies, and we did in the Trans-Selkirks. They're fabulous because you get to really appreciate the trails. But I think being crushed by the trail and having to try to get through it, I think that's an inner journey rather than my view on trails is to appreciate it. After you're smashed and you've got no energy and you've got hardly room to speak, I think probably wouldn't appreciate the trails very much.
Yeah, probably. And in terms of the book itself, it was a pretty good read. It was, it was nice storytelling. I guess maybe I think you can probably get something out of it even if you've never heard of Scott Jurek or Speed Goat or any of these characters, because there's also just the completion of this task, like to run for 46 days and not sleep and go through all this, to put your body through all this. I mean, it just proves how resilient human beings can be. And in that way, that could kind of, everybody I think could maybe get a little inspiration from the book in that way, even if, even if you don't actually want to, sort of like us, even if you don't actually want to do a huge adventure that completely beats you up, you can still get some motivation out of it. It was tough at the beginning, I find, a little bit with the injuries and the low points, just because it seemed like it was going to be a bit of a negative.
Seemed to get discouraging quite early on.
Yeah, quite early
agree.
on. But once you got past that, there were all the other characters and the people that were his trail angels, and that would leave things on the trail, and it just sort of, it's so nice that that you see that there was this kind of community that ended up developing around Scott's journey. So it was almost like everybody's journey. He sort of seemed to bring it together.
Yeah, I mean, there's this saying, it takes a village to raise a child. It almost takes a village to get one person down that sort of task.
Definitely.
So do you want to give it a score?
For the story, I would give it a 4 out of 5, because there were just, the 4 is only because there were some points where I was starting to get discouraged, like sort of not right at the beginning, but in around those first days before they got to the halfway point. Readability, it's a good, easy read. I guess I would give that probably a 4.5, let's say.
Okay, so you're giving it a composite 4.25.
Yes,
stars.
yeah, about a 4.25.
Yeah, I think that's, maybe my reasons are a little different, but I think I'll probably give it 4 out of 5. Great story, fantastic characters, very readable. I thought the aspect of having Jenny talk about her perspective on the thing was great, because they give you another angle and more insight. Epic story. I thought it was a little bit discouraging in some ways. It part of the enormity of the task as well. But I didn't take to some of the characters. I thought, oh, they're not really helping. Why has Scott asked this guy to come along? He's not really enjoying his company, or say, yeah, he's a good guy, but. So that was a little bit sort of emotionally negative as well. And I thought the end was a bit anticlimactic. We should have had a big orchestra, and the hero arrives to fanfares, or a bit more information about the ending. But it was just like, I'm totally exhausted, and I got to the end.
Yeah, and I celebrated Jenny's birthday. But yeah, there was that missing. There was a little bit of like, so.
I remember as well, they dismissed the park rangers a little bit at the end. I remember there being quite a controversy. Oh, we're going to have a controversy about whether it's controversy.
I say controversy.
Okay. Yeah, there's one of those about the rangers gave him three fines for different things, bringing too many people into the park, and foodstuffs, or consuming alcohol. He very politely just dismisses all of that in the book. It went on for several days, and there was a media storm about that, but I guess that's not part of the big finale. I think I was expecting something at the end, like some insight, like, you've done this thing. What's the
like
insight?
A race report?
Yeah. What's the insight? What's your take-home message now? Have you found yourself? Have you learned something about yourself? Well, I think Scott's already learned everything there is to learn about himself on some of the challenges that he's done, and this was just another one he did under certain circumstances and was able to pull it off. So it was a little bit anticlimactic from that point of view for me. So I would give 4 for that. The book itself is great. The color pictures in it, fantastic. It's really good to go back and look at, okay, he's here on this day. Oh, this is a picture of him doing it. You can see what that means to go through some of the rocky areas, some of the particularly difficult sections, or how he was looking at the end versus how he's looking at the start. That was all pretty good. So I'll give that a big thumbs up there. That's North by Scott Jurek.
Thank you once again for everybody that's listening to Running Book Reviews. And as usual, you can leave us feedback about anything that you'd want us to improve, or you can even tell us if there are books that you're interested in us reviewing. So we're open to suggestions, and you can contact us through social media. We're running book reviews on Facebook and Instagram, and on Twitter we're reviews_running. That's it for today.
Cue the outro music.
Exactly.